Welcome back to another mental health moment with Be Inspired Counseling and Consulting. So, I have one of our awesome therapists with us today, Melissa McKinney, and we're going to be talking about a topic that I feel like sometimes does not always get the I guess, I don't know, talked about as much as it should be. And it's a reality that any one of us can find ourselves in as we are either dealing with a family member who is maybe aging, or we're dealing with a child that may have a disability, or we may just be taking care of people in our life and we start to feel overwhelmed by the responsibility of it all. So, Melissa has come on today to help us talk a little bit about caregiver stress so that you can kind of know a little bit about what it is and then maybe some ways to take care of yourself if you find yourself in this type of role that is creating stress and maybe even burnout in your life. So, welcome, Melissa.
Hi, Christy. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, maybe just tell us a little bit about kind of what you see caregivers struggle with, and then how does that maybe sometimes turn into stress and maybe even burnout?
Well, one of the things that I've come across and just some of the clients that I've worked with and where I am at Be Inspired and in times past was, caregivers have a lot of responsibility. Depending on the disability of the individual that they care for, sometimes it couldn't be something that could have been long term. So this individual could have had a condition for an extended period of time, or it can be something that comes on suddenly. Let's just say you were involved in an accident. Before that moment, everything was fine. And now that loved one is now in a completely different situation. You're responsible to provide care. You're responsible for doctor appointments, understanding medical professionals and what they're saying, the financial stressors, transportation. What resources does the community offer to help support you in that? Are there any, resources? I find that a lot of families feel isolated and alone in their caregiver responsibilities because it's really, really difficult to find community and then to connect with that community if they have one. I'll give you an example. Individuals that suffer with severe mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar, major depressive disorder, there are very few communities where those families can come and seek support. What do I do to support my family member that has schizophrenia? What do I do? I know that there are locations around the state, but I know in our area, sometimes those resources are very, very few, minimal.
Yeah, well, and I'm even thinking I've had calls before where people were seeking, like maybe if they had a family member that was struggling with dementia, and knowing how to care, knowing what's the support for me. So there's just, like you said, a lot of different challenges that you can have that then can put you in a caregiver position that you weren't expecting to be in, right? That or you didn't in your mind prepare to be in, and then trying to find community who gets what you're going through and then can also be supportive of you in that
Absolutely.
process is really challenging. I can even think about one of my family members recently turned to me and they said, hey, so whenever I get to this age, and if, another family member's not around, are you going to be able to take care of me? And I was like, of course. But, in my mind, I hadn't went that far down the path. I hadn't thought about, wait,
Or
one day I'm going to be a caregiver. And then what is that going to look like? And like you said, it could be somebody that is even my age that finds themselves in a caregiver position because of an unexpected thing that happens to somebody that they love, you know? So yeah, it's not an easy path to walk.
no, it's not. It's not. And sometimes you have a primary caregiver. Let's just say you're dealing with aging parents, and there is one designated individual who's seemingly taken on all the responsibility. That person has to make some decisions, really hard ones, like, do I want the involvement of my siblings? Are they reliable? Sometimes those individuals may find themselves like, I just rather do it all myself. And then I have found that sometimes the parent themselves are like, I don't want anybody to take care of me but you. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're like with this, like, me? What do you mean, me? And they're like, you. I don't want the rest of them to take care of me. They're just going to mess it up.
Yeah.
So, it's things like, it's things that you don't even consider that might be a part of your conversation. And then if you're a married person, not only do you have that responsibility of caregiving, but so does your spouse. They have a role to play also. Are they okay with the time that you have to spend with that loved one? How does that impact your marriage? Are you guys finding time for each other in the midst of all these different responsibilities? I find that doctor appointments and medical is such a major part of caregiving responsibility, in addition to feeding, all of the activities of daily living, bathing, feeding, all those important things. So it can be, a lot of stressors can happen. And then there's the financial aspect. Do I have the money to take care of this loved one? What income do they bring to the table, if any? If none, how do we work this into our budget? It's all those things that, we don't take time to think about or consider. And those things can be really, add additional stress to an already stressful situation.
Yeah. Well, and I even think about, like, you're talking about the medical thing. I mean, and I know we were talking earlier before we got on here, like bringing people to doctor's appointments, things like that. And even understanding some of what I call the medical ease, like the language of, what a doctor is trying to say, that can be overwhelming. Sometimes dealing with a system, like you said, even trying to find resources can be hard, but then navigating the medical arena can be really challenging if you don't know, if you've never done that before, or even if you've done that before, it can still be really challenging about, who do I ask this for? How do I advocate for care? How do I also make sure that I'm taking care of myself in the midst of all of this? And like you said, the financial stuff can really be overwhelming, especially if you also have, limited resources or a budget or that you can't exceed. And then now you're having the stress of taking care of someone else in your life that you maybe didn't anticipate taking care of at this point in time. So what would you say for people that are finding, maybe they're listening to us right now, Melissa, and they're like, oh my gosh, you are so describing my situation. I feel very overwhelmed. I also feel very lonely and isolated. I feel like I carry a lot of the burden of responsibility, and maybe I've taken it on. Maybe I want to care for this person in my life and I gladly want to do it because this person maybe have taken care of me in the past, or I just love them and I want to do this. But they find themselves really kind of wearing thin. What are some suggestions that you would have for somebody who is listening right now and being like, y'all are so talking about me?
Well, Christy, that's a great question. But before we get to the answer on that question, I think one of the things that we should probably cover are some of the things that caregivers may actually experience. We did talk about some financial situations and issues with transportation, community, but some of the things that um, a person might experience is symptoms of anxiety, depression, increased irritability. You may find yourself like, I've heard a lot of individuals say snippy, very short in your answer. You might even experience a loss of interest in things that you once were able to do. Time constraints. Maybe now you don't have the time. Feelings of resentment towards the person that you're caring for. That is a big one. And there's a lot of guilt that comes with that, because you realize that you're responsible and you don't want to feel that way. Most people that I've talked with, they don't want that their loved one is a burden. They don't want to feel that they're overwhelmed. They want to be able to provide the needed care. But sometimes, the lack of support or the lack, because we have challenges with asking for help. Sometimes it's hard for us to do that. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's probably hard
and
for
this
people to ask for.
idea.
Oh, sorry. I was going to
Yeah,
say, I think it's
sometimes it
hard for
is.
people to
No,
ask
it's
for help
okay.
because they're the one that is helping, they're the helper. So I always find that helpers are
Mhm.
often the ones that struggle the most with asking for help.
I agree with that. Because sometimes there's a sense of value that comes with that helping. It's an underlying motivator. But then when they are overburdened or they are overcommitted, then that's when they find themselves in places where it's very difficult to navigate. And so that irritability, the things we were talking about, depression. Sometimes caregivers can be so saddened and such dark places that they may even themselves feel suicidal. These are things that most caregivers don't get an opportunity to really talk about, and finding individuals who are empathetic, who aren't attempting to try to tell them what to do versus being an active and reflective listener.
Can really go a long
Sometimes
way.
they're not able to find that in their community.
Yeah. Well, if somebody finds themselves kind of feeling some of the things that you've talked
So,
about, what should they do?
well, some of the things that you can do is identify boundaries. We don't talk about boundaries. Saying no is sometimes a very difficult thing. But, individuals can have very porous or open boundaries. And with those types of boundaries, anything goes. Anything can come in, anything can come out as far as information. And sometimes you have to be able to be honest with yourself about what you can really accomplish and do well. Sometimes it's not always about activity, it's about quality of relationship. So when you are able to know what your boundaries are, and can say, you know what, I would love to be able to do that. I just can't right now. Or I'd love to be able to take you this place. I'm just not able to. And learning to be
Yeah.
comfortable with that no, and even being able to maybe be helpful in finding a solution to a situation like that. One of the things I teach is when we talk about assertive communication includes being able to identify your need and want, and being able to say it while you are, mindful of the needs and wants of others. So,
Yeah.
another thing that can definitely be helpful when we are talking about caregiver stress is that idea of asking for help. If it's too much, let's say you need respite, try to find places of respite. I recently shared with an individual, I don't know if you know where Randolph State Park is, since we live in the Pineville, Alexandria area. For $4, you can go to Randolph State Park. They'll give you a little tour of the museum. But on the backside, there is a walkway into a wooded area. It is the most beautiful place. It is so serene and peaceful. They'll even tell you where the eagle nest is if you're interested. But sometimes you have to create space for times of respite. And sometimes when we think of respite, we think, oh, well, it's got to be hours and days. No, sometimes it can be 5 minutes. If you can give yourself 5 minutes of quiet time, maybe close your eyes, visualize, take deep breaths.
I'm trying to do it right now, Melissa.
Sometimes those quick moments of rest, can be well, visualize your happy place, Christy, wherever that is. It
That's
could be
right.
a beach. It could be your favorite wooded area. It could be, you carving out time to watch sunrises and sunsets. But making time, and I hear all the time, I'm just exhausted. I don't have time for that. Well, you have to decide that that's important. Everything begins with a decision. Everything. And when we say, well, I'm too busy for that, well, that was a decision. And sometimes we don't think about decision making in that way. You made a decision. You decided, I'm too busy for that. So I would encourage you to open yourself to the possibility that sometimes respite, times of refreshing, they may be short, but they can be meaningful and impactful.
Yeah, I really love that. Well, and like you said, part of it's all of it's a decision, and it is a decision. Sometimes we feel, I'm assuming, especially with caregivers, sometimes it feels like maybe our decisions have been taken away from us, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
it's things have been decided for us in a way. But the truth is that you may not have huge decisions you can make right in your life at the moment, but you can make those small decisions to take care of you, to ask for help, to realize you need help, to make sure that you take, whether it be 5 minutes to walk somewhere else and just imagine, like I did for a second there, your happy place or something that calming to you. Or it could be, if you are a spiritual person, moments of prayer or
Mhm.
moments of, connecting with other people. Or you may just need to get on the phone and talk to a friend and process the fact that what you're going through is hard, you know? But I love all those
Absolutely.
suggestions of just being able to take a moment to figure out what you need and be okay with asking for what you need or doing what you need. Because I think a lot of times we keep on saying, I know for caregivers, especially, like one day I will do that. The person I love and I'm taking care of is priority. But the truth is, they may require a lot of you, but it doesn't mean that you have to not be okay with knowing that you need help too sometimes, and that you need to be cared for, in whatever way that may be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, because what happens in the end is that, without that time, we feel that guilt for, feeling resentful. One of the things I noticed in the research was this statement: my life revolves around this person. And that can be, for some people, that can be overwhelming, whether you're taking care of young children, even I'm a parent, I'm a mother. I remember my life revolved around my children. That was a tough place to be. And I had kids, they didn't like to sleep at night in the beginning. So, when you're, a new mother, you have all those challenges. I know some of our conversation has focused to caregiving towards older adults, but let's just talk about the entire life cycle. You go through periods of time in your role as caregiver, whatever the age of the individual, and you can lose yourself in those places. And I know in my own personal experience, there were times where depression came. You could feel the deep sadnesses because it was seemingly, and my husband and I have a husband, we work together. But even in those times where you have a partner, sometimes you can feel very alone in your experience.
Yeah. Well, if somebody is listening, Melissa, and they're like, man, a lot of what you're talking about, it really is hitting home with me, but I've just maybe struggled to kind of really take action to have some change and to take care of myself. Or maybe I just am finding myself maybe experiencing anxiety, or I'm finding myself in a depression during this season of caregiving for me. And maybe I need a little bit of extra help. How can people reach out and maybe work with you if they're finding themselves just needing some extra support?
Well, they can definitely call our number, 318-266-7021, and they can request a session with me. In the meantime, some things that I've been talking with individuals about is simplicity, things that are simple. What is something that I can do to get emotions out simply? You can get a sheet of paper and a color that represents the emotion that you're experiencing at that time, and just color, 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 color. Sometimes I find that sometimes when they're sitting to journal or write, the words may not come. I've begun encouraging individuals, just color until there's clarity of mind. And if words come after that point, wonderful. If not, it wasn't wasted time. Still, you were able to convey on paper the emotion you're feeling right now. Nobody has to know what that color means but you.
Mm,
And so, in a
that's
very
right.
personal way, you are able to expend some energy in releasing that strong emotion, whatever it is. A quick walk outside, fresh air versus the inside air. Those small moments can sometimes be very meaningful. I was talking with one individual who just the outside, quiet time in the morning, having their coffee, reflective time. Sometimes you might have to get up a little early before everyone else gets up in the day. And I know those things are super difficult to do. So maybe not every day, but maybe 1 or 2 days per week. Small steps in an effort to develop a sense of, kind of recapture who you are as an individual. Because I love when we go on the flights, the stewardess always says, put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on anyone else. Well, why is that? You can't take care of anyone else if you haven't taken care of yourself. And if these individuals are relying on you solely for their care, as difficult as it is, you have to take care of yourself first to be able to give them the best of who you are.
Yeah, I love that.
It's so important.
Well, I hope if you're listening and this is something that you're resonating with, that just taking a few, and you can just pick one. Actually, we can make it so simple as to pick one thing that maybe Melissa suggested and just try to find some time. Again, we don't even have to do a lot of time, right? Because sometimes change just takes small steps. So just take some time to maybe just try to do it once or twice, and then maybe try to do it a third time, because we know that when you're dealing with a lot and there's a lot of balls in the air, it's hard to keep them all up there. So just trying to take one thing at a time, one step at a time, can really go a long way. And then if you find yourself really needing that extra support, or maybe you don't have a lot of access to that support in your life and you need somebody else to be able to help you figure out the path forward, then definitely give us a call. Melissa is an excellent therapist. So if you need a space to process, then I always find when I go sit in her office that I feel calmer when I leave. Truly, Melissa, I feel calmer when I leave, even for myself. So definitely reach out, because, there is some things that we feel like, I have to go through this myself, but there are people that would like to help you figure out the ways to not have to do it all by yourself. And even if you don't know how to connect to supports around you, figuring out how to connect to other people in your life too, that can help you walk this journey. So if you'd like, reach out to us. But thank you, Melissa, for coming on and sharing all these insights. And hopefully maybe somebody that's experiencing this today will feel seen and heard. Even though they're not talking to us, we're talking to them, and they're like, yeah, they're talking about me, and maybe can take a step to also taking the time to take care of them along the journey too. Until next time.